Hello guys and gals and welcome! So today we're going to be testing out something really interesting. Today we're going to be testing out a feature known as Stagger. Stagger doesn't seem ridiculously complicated. However, Stagger has a lot of mechanics, and I can bring them up on the screen right now because I actually have them preloaded. So, crowd control effects are slows, immobilizes, stuns, knockbacks, knockdowns, taunts, fears, tethers, daze, chill, freeze, and of course that means that you can fully stagger a boss, which is considered under a crowd control effect. Now, the goal of today is to test and see what stagger rules there are. I've got a lot of different things that I want to test out today. We're going to be testing out tons of them. So first off, number one, I want to test out the diminishing returns. I want to see how severe these diminishing returns are, how many times you can attack with the same slow or stun or whatever before eventually it just doesn't really work anymore. How much stagger each CC has. Like, the bigger the CC, obviously, I would assume the bigger the stagger, but are all the crowd controls equal in that regard? Like, is a stun the same as a daze? Is a daze the same as a knockback? And so forth and so on. And so we're going to basically get to bosses. We're going to play around with the idea. We're going to, like, cast a slow over and over again. We're going to upgrade skills and things like that and see if the stagger effects increase. We're also going to see if they transfer across characters, too. Like, for instance, if I stagger a monster a bunch of times and then somebody else comes in and staggers, does it change the result? Hopefully by the end of this, we'll have a much more solid grasp of how stagger works. And in that, we will obviously be a little bit more wise in terms of staggering bosses. I'm enlisting a little bit of help today from Leon and Borast, so we're going to have some fun with this. And I will pause the video here, and we're going to come back once we're at the boss for the first round of testing. Alright, so here we are in one of the boss battles, and we've got the Lord Commander, and I've got my little baby dagger on. So the first thing we're going to be testing is Decrepify. So I've got Decrepify, and let's just go ahead and put this on my right click, or my click, so we can actually really get this in here. So the first cast of Decrepify, which is a 40% slow, which is a pretty large slow, gives us no stagger, 5.5 stagger, 5.73, 4.25. It seems like sometimes it doesn't even give stagger. Alright, let's let him cool off for a second, which is basically what I want to do here. So I want to test out diminishing returns. Let's actually write down these numbers too. It seems to be like it's random. So the first curse is 17 stagger. That's pretty massive. The second curse after that, of course, it's hard to see the numbers pop up because, of course, they don't really like. I kind of wish they would come up in the chat here. It would be easier to get a good idea of what's going on.
I'm not ready yet.
I should have grabbed some temerity pants so that I could heal myself constantly.
What's up, buddy?
What's up, Chunks? We're doing a little testing today on staggering.
You streaming?
Yeah, well, no, I'm recording.
Oh, okay.
So the second one was 5.61. And then after 5.61 is, well, we got 13.57 that time. See, it really does kind of seem like it's time-based. So, like, if I cast the stagger on him quickly, it's 17, and then it's 2.15 immediately after. And it seems almost as if the staggering effect is diminishing depending on, like, how quickly you're spamming it on the target. So the faster you spam the stagger on the target, the less it does, to the point where it goes all the way down to 0.6, it looks like. I can't seem to get it to go any lower than 0.6. The next thing we need to test kind of is like somebody else staggering. So one of you guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spam my stagger on the target. And what I want you guys to do is I want you to, after I've got the stagger bar down like completely, all the diminishing returns, I want you to throw one of your staggers up and tell me if it goes at full power or not. Because I'm curious as to whether or not it's going to be like a cumulative thing across the entire group or whether it only affects the player itself. Alright, so I'm going to load them up. Alright, we're loading. I'm loading him up. He is now at minimum stagger for me. One of you guys hit him with a stagger and tell me what kind of numbers you guys get.
Your essence.
Did you guys get a big number, or was it a little tiny stagger?
I'm low on
40.8 on the shout.
Okay, so it's player based specifically. So I mean, we can definitely just go ahead and write that down. So the diminishing returns are definitely player based, which means they don't cross players. So multiple players spamming the same curse probably won't have an effect. Borast, can you put Decrepify on your bar for a second if you don't have it, and just like we'll test that because it's the same exact skill, the same exact percentage, and just to make sure that the player-based thing is true. Because who knows, it might even be type-based. So like it might only be slows, or it might only be like, you know, like if two people are spamming stuns at the same time, or two people are spamming chills at the same time, etc. So I'm gonna go ahead and load them up, Borast, and then you you hit him with yours and tell me if you still get the 17 for the base Decrepify. Alright, so I've got him all loaded up with mine, so he's currently max staggered out. Are you still getting the 17 even after I've maxed his stagger out?
low on essence.
Yeah, I got the 17.
Okay, so we know for sure 100% that it is player based. So your stagger and my stagger diminishing returns have no effect on one another. All right, now we need to test multiple different versions of things. I'm running out of potions. Let's see here. I need to get a different kind of crowd control effect on this. I'm trying to think if there's another easy one that I can test. I think my barbarian might be the best for this. Let me swap out to my barb. I'll rejoin you guys in a second. Alright, so now I have my barbarian, and basically the only reason I grabbed him is because he has multiple stuns. He's got multiple crowd control effects, basically. He's got his leap, which is a 70% slow. And he also has his ground stomp, which is a stun that he can use repeatedly. He's got a couple different crowd controls, but I kind of want to see how it works between like a stun and a leap. So let's make sure we're up here. Oh wow. Okay, so like just me being in the group, as soon as he basically touched me, he started getting the small staggers from the bleed, which are just occurring really fast. So 0.51, 0.51, 0.51, 0.51. They seem to be capped at a very low amount of additional stagger that they're supplying to the boss. But I'm not even really doing anything. He basically just hits me, and then the bleeds are immediately on him. So the ground stomp in this situation is going to give me... It didn't even hit him. Let's see here. Got nothing. It seems like my bleeds are interfering. Hold on. Let me pull the points from that one that makes the bleeds happen. There we go. I think that's the one that's making it so the bleeds are happening. Yeah. Okay. Alright, so ground stomp. 10.71 stagger. Alright, and if we follow up with a second ground stomp, I'm assuming it's not going to be 10.71. It is 10.71. So the cooldown on that is high enough that it's literally still 10.71 between the two ground stomps, which means there's no diminishing return for 11.28 seconds. Let's try the two together. So we're going to do our ground stomp first, and then we'll do our leap. So the leap was 1.34 after the ground stomp. That was pathetic. Let's see what the leap is by itself with the diminishing returns not in place. So let's give it a good 5 or 10 seconds here so we can really get a good feel for it. Alright, leap. Still 1.34. So even by itself, the leap is just not as powerful, which doesn't even make much sense. That's a 70% slow for 5 seconds, but it's only 1.34 stagger.
Have any potions?
Yeah, every single time, even after waiting a delay, it's only 1.34 stagger.
So my shot went from 40 to 30 to 17 now because this boss has been staggered already a couple times, like full staggered.
So what we're thinking is maybe every time he gets staggered, it becomes harder to stagger him.
Yeah.
Well, let's try this. I think we can reset these bosses relatively easily, so let's do this real quick. Here, I'm gonna pause it. I think the easiest way for us. All right, so we decided to switch out bosses because that was a weird trio boss, so we want to make sure that we've got like a better. Oh, ow! Testing. I hate this one. He always like spits at you as soon as you walk in. All right, so let's test the ground stomp first, which is. Of course, it doesn't pop up with the number. Man, his stagger bar is going up really fast. It's not showing me the numbers. Why is it not showing me anything on this guy? His stagger bar is definitely going up, but I'm not seeing any numbers actually appear above his head.
I don't have any potions.
Oh, I see what's going on. He's so tall. He's so tall that the stagger numbers are literally like appearing like way above his head, like literally to the point where they're in the sky. I think we might not have found the right boss for testing stagger numbers.
Another dungeon. Here we go.
Well, you just can't see them. Like, well, that was 24.48. I finally got that one. That was the
40.8. And he's already been staggered once. Challenge shot 40.8.
I know I was gonna die. He just keeps spitting at me. So my ground stomp with this guy was 20.48. He's been staggered once. 24.48. Alright, let me try the leap on this guy to see if there's a difference. That was pathetic. Man, he is just like one of the nastiest bosses, isn't he? Like that poison, like funnel cone thing that he does, combined with all the little puddles he puts on the floor. Like, he certainly isn't happy that we're testing our damage out on him, is he? .06. I don't know why, but it seems like my 70% leap does like basically nothing to him, which is kind of sad. It's weird because there doesn't seem to be any correlation between, for instance, the Necromancer, which I got a 13.5 second or a 17-second stagger whenever I used Decrepify, versus the 3.36 stagger that I get for 70% slow on leap. I'm not exactly sure what the difference is here. Could it be a duration thing? Perhaps the Decrepify just has a much longer duration. What is the duration on Decrepify, Borast? 24.
I must wait.
So my bleed from Flay is doing 0.68 because of the 10% slow of hamstring.
Well, and of course now he's staggered.
Out of potions.
I want to test this real quick. So, this... Alright, so he's been staggered several times now. Let's see if the, I'm still getting the same amount from Ground Stomp. So Ground Stomp should be 24.48. Now it's 18.36. So let's do that again. I'm pretty sure that was the same. It looks like it does diminish with each stagger. So every stagger, the crowd control has less effect each time they're staggered. Because it seems to be pretty solid 18.3 secs. Let's stagger him again and let's see if it goes down any further. So just try not to kill him, but we'll just stagger him as much as we can until the bar activates.
I must wait.
It definitely seems like they're not weighted equally. Like, some staggers definitely seem to hit the bar a lot harder than others. Some crowd control effects. Like, my ground stomp seems to be a hell of a lot stronger in general for staggering than my leap, which is a 70% slow. Alright, so now ground stomp gives... hold on. Let me make sure he's completely free of any diminishing returns that might be going on. Okay, I think that should be enough time. 3.06 is what I'm getting for ground stomp. Are you guys getting like horribly low numbers as well now?
Yep. My challenging shot's 5.1
So he is diminishing with every single
stagger.
stagger. So the more we stagger him, the more difficult it is to stagger him the next time, the next time, the next time. I mean, we've basically discovered at least a couple different things. Let's pick a let's pick a different boss. Hold on, let me pause this. We'll go find a different one. All right, we got another boss here. Let's see if we can get some more good numbers off of this guy. This is the Necromancer's Coffin. All right, the one I'm really interested in right off the bat is the leap. So let's see, 3.83 with no stagger. Alright, so what we're trying to figure out here is, like, after each stagger, it seems to be diminishing. Ground stomp, 30 point... I didn't quite see it. Hold on, let me try this again. It goes so fast, it's a little hard to actually see it. 30.6 is the original number. Interesting. My kick has a knockback on it, and that seems to also provide stagger. So let me test kick real quick. So kick with first stagger is... I think that was the bleed stagger. Let's try that again. 6.12. Now, it does seem to go down as the monster is staggered. So this is the first time he's been staggered, so we're going to go ahead and finish him off. This is going to put him in his first stagger event. After he goes in his first stagger event, everything seems to diminish proportionally. So now he's out of his first stagger event, and I'm going to hit him with my ground stomp, and now it's 24.48, which is correct to the last boss, so that's also important here, so it doesn't seem to be boss related. So that is the same number that I got last time on the second stagger for ground stomp. Kick, which was 6.12, is 1.8? That was pretty stark contrast. Let's try that again. 4.9 for the second. Alright, and then we also have leap. I want to test leap one more time. So leap is 3.06. It definitely does seem like they definitely don't want you staggering the boss, like, with certain effects. Now, one of the things that Leon was testing is Challenging Shout, and Challenging Shout has a massive stagger attached to it, which is Taunt. So Taunt seems to have a very high stagger amount comparatively to something like the 70% leap, which I'm currently using. Also, the bleeds. So I took the bleeds out for right now for the testing, but like for instance the Thorns bleed that comes from Tough as Nails. Whenever the monster hits you, they bleed. And as soon as they start bleeding, they just start staggering. 0.68, 0.68, 0.68. And it's just constant. That is actually probably a pretty hefty bleed, especially if you get like multiple barbarians in the group. You could have a lot of stagger adding to the bar very quickly. It does seem like if it triggers too quickly, it goes down even further to 0.11. I see it a couple times here, but I think it has to do with the fact that the bleeds are separated from each other, because it does seem like multiple instances of the stagger effects are like gives you less diminishing returns when they are separated out from each other. I think that's exactly what we're seeing here. So the further separated they are from each other, the events, the more stagger you get, which means spamming an effect on the monster repeatedly basically has no good. There's no good effect to just spam the monster over and over and over and over and over again with an effect. You kind of want to spread them out a little bit, so you get your ground stomp, and then your next ground stomp is going to be separated from that one. It doesn't look like spamming multiple effects though has any real diminishing returns. So like for instance, if you have a ground stomp and a leap and a kick, you can very easily go back and forth between all of them with minimal downtime. So that's a 3.67 even after I spammed multiple other effects. And that is conducive to the third stagger, because we're at the third stagger at this point, I think. And the ground stomp is at 18. Let me run another ground stomp on him just to be sure. I don't think I caught him with that one. Some of these abilities don't really have the largest AoE effect. That's interesting. The ground stomp doesn't seem to be hitting him anymore. Either that or I'm just not standing close enough. It could also just be some jankiness with the way that the stagger bar kind of like puts the numbers up there. Which is why I took Tough as Nails off in the first place.
I have no potions.
Now he's on his fourth stagger. 3.06. Wow, that's terrible. So that's just like, at a certain point, like once he's staggered enough times, we definitely notice that it goes down so low that it seems next to impossible to stagger them at that point. Like at this point, he's taking like basically no stagger from any of our effects, and we're probably not going to be able to stagger him an additional time. I mean, if we just sat here, we just didn't do any damage. If we just didn't do any damage, I mean, eventually he might end up getting staggered, but it does seem like, what is this, the fourth time he's been staggered?
Yes.
Like, it seems like after the fourth time, the diminishing returns hit a point where it's just like, you're basically doing nothing by comparison. So, like, as an example, when I first ground stomp him with before he's been staggered at all, it was 30.6 seconds. Now when I ground stomp him, it is 3.06, which is not a coincidence. The decimal point just moved over. So I think we can very safely say that that is a direct reduction of, what is that? I can't even remember. It's just 90%. Yeah. Or, actually, I'm not even sure. Like, it would just be a direct decimal move over, like a whole tenth of a place. Alright, let's just go ahead and kill him. I think we've got enough data. Alright, guys and gals, so we've collected all the data, and we've come to some pretty stark conclusions. It doesn't take a genius to figure this stuff out once you have the numbers, and the numbers are pretty clear. So first off, let's go over some of the original questions. So number one, diminishing returns. Player-based. So we determined through testing that the staggers are player-based. They do not transfer across players, which means that the diminishing returns for one player do not affect the diminishing returns for another player. So, very important. Number 2, how much stagger each CC has. So we actually came to a conclusion on this as well for the most part. It seems like the clear losers in this are chill and slow, which seem to have the least amount of stagger. I don't know why in particular these have the least amount of stagger over the others, but it definitely does seem like they just have far less stagger than anything else. The higher numbers came from things like Taunt, Stun, and Freeze. Those were definitely the higher numbers. So whenever we used a freeze effect, like for instance Frost Nova was a 22.95. Challenging Shout, which is a taunt, was 51, which was pretty crazy. Ground Stomp was 30.6. That's a stun. So as you can see here, the stun, the taunt, and the freezing effects tended to do very well as far as stagger. But we also tested things like chill and slow. Chill was relatively low at 8.41, and because it applied repeatedly from things like Penitent Greaves, it was subject to the penalties very quickly. It started to, do less and less and less. Bleed slows and things like that happened on a regular basis were often less than 1. So there would be things like 0.68 or like 0.62 or something like that. Very, very low numbers. I mean, granted, they do happen all the time and constantly. So at the very least, they are constantly applying, but they tended to be among the lowest numbers as far as like the stagger goes. Number 3, we asked the question, how long before the diminishing returns cease? And the answer to that question seemed to be 16 seconds. So after 16 seconds, the diminishing returns seem to completely vanish. There also seems to be 2 different diminishing returns, so this is important. First is the same skill used repeatedly on the boss. So if you cast the same attack multiple times, you get a huge diminishing return that varies between 90% for an instantaneous recast, all the way down to 0% if you wait 16 seconds. And we tested multiple different variables, so after 5 seconds it was 6.83, which was a 60% reduction. If you waited 15 seconds, it was a 20% reduction at 13.51. And it basically just continued this way. Like, it's just a scaling between 90% and 0%, depending on how long you wait. And if you don't wait any time whatsoever, it's a 90% flat reduction. The other reduction is the boss is harder to stagger a second time. So this is actually something that we found out as we played around with the stagger, and we staggered the boss multiple times. So each subsequent stagger became harder by an exact percentage. So the first time that you attack her, she has a 0% reduction, or the boss has a 0% reduction. And 51 seconds was the challenging shout versus a non-staggered boss. So basically this is the first time you are staggering her. At 2 times, so after the first stagger and you are trying to stagger the boss a second time, it is a 20% reduction in all stagger effects. At the third time is a 40% reduction in all stagger effects. And then the 4th time was massive. So once you try to stagger her for the 4th time, and I say her because I'm thinking about Lilith, it is a 90% reduction in all stagger bonuses, to the point where literally that 51 stagger bar that's being added from challenging stout becomes a 5.1. And we tested this successfully with multiple abilities. So ground stomp became from 30.6 to 3.06, which is literally a flat negative 90%. Corpse Tendrils didn't do very well, unfortunately. That was pretty low. Leap did very poorly at 70% slow, even though the slow was extremely high. Leap had very poor numbers across the board. Slow just seems to be absolutely the worst, along with chill. And the only reason we can assume this is just because everyone has these. That's pretty much what I can tell. Chill and slows are something that seem to exist within just about every single character within the game. The druid can use poisons to slow everything. The barbarian can use bleeds to slow everything with the passive. The freaking druid, I think, has like tons of slows just in general. The sorceress is putting out chilling effects all over the place, and then tons of characters have chilling effects. There's even Penitent Greaves, like caltrops on the rogue. There's the cold imbuement. But it does seem like, despite the fact that chill is relatively ineffective, freeze is extremely effective. So if you can actually freeze the target versus chilling them, that's a pretty big difference. And that means that items like Frostburns probably would work a lot better in terms of chilling, or rather just staggering in general, because Frostburns have a huge... was it 25%, I believe, is on Frosties? Yeah, 25% lucky hit chance to just freeze enemies for 2 seconds, which means that it's going to provide a very large stagger hit every single time that goes off. As opposed to something like Penitent Greaves, which is not going to apply as much stagger, but it will apply multiple stagger hits over a long duration. Which basically, through our testing, we found out that Penitent Greaves were 8.4 on the initial, and then 1.28 each subsequent hit after that. And of course, that's going to decrease with each staggering effect that you're putting on the target. So it's going to go down by 20% after the first stagger, 40% after the second, and 90% after the third, which is pretty hefty. We actually were thinking about testing to see like if it went down any further after the fourth stagger, but we're pretty sure at this point that the fourth, like if you were able to get the boss to the fifth stagger, it would probably just still be 90%, because it doesn't look like anything goes down more than 90% in these equations. Even when I spammed Decrepify as fast as I could humanly spam it, it would not go lower than 1.78, which was a 90% reduction on that Decrepify. Now, after I staggered her a couple times, obviously, it would go down to like 13.57 and then 5.61. And then that can be reduced by an additional 90%, which is pretty crazy. So, like, if you run that on a calculator real quick, you'll see that once you have staggered a boss the third time and you are working on the fourth, at 5.61, you reduce that by 90%, and now you are sitting at a 0.561 stagger from your spamming of Decrepify, which is terrible. And if we go down to Challenging Shout, which is 5.1, spamming Challenging Shout, again, is going to give you a 0.51 reduction in the stagger bar. So they really don't want you to stagger a boss more than 4 times. Realistically, I think in most combat, like if you've staggered the boss 4 times, she's probably dead anyway. If not, you just really don't have a lot of damage. So like I can't really see most people getting a boss past 4 staggers anyway. Unless they're just deliberately trying to get the boss past 4 staggers. But it's good information. I think what this basically tells us, and the conclusion of this, is slow and chill is not really that great. Not great for staggering, but it does add to the bar. So, I mean, if you have them and they're extra and you're not really worried about it, they are going to add stagger to the bar regardless, right? But it does seem like a lot of the other effects, like Taunt, Knockback, Knockdown, Freeze, I believe Daze as well, and other effects that are not slows and chills tend to work a lot better. It's just, in general, these seem to be better for staggering a boss. On top of this, we can also take another conclusion, which is multiple crowd control effects stagger better. So if you weave in multiple effects, they don't cause a reduction to each other. So a stun is not going to reduce the stagger of a knockdown, and a knockdown is not going to reduce the stagger of a freeze, and so forth and so on. It's really just spamming the same ability multiple times that causes the problem. So if you have multiple staggering effects or multiple crowd control effects, and you're weaving them in on the boss back and forth. So you've got like a knockdown and then a knockback, and then you've got a taunt, and then you've got a daze, and then you've got a freeze, and you just keep rotating them. It seems to be the best effect to get the boss down as fast as possible. So rotating crowd control effects is going to be the quickest stagger. I think that's pretty much everything. I'm going to put a lot of this stuff in the description of the video for you guys so you can like pull from our numbers. There's no reason not to share testing data. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when we're just yakking about stagger effects. And keep watching.